Hey everyone, thanks for checking out this second video that I'm making about the classic Avalon Hill wargame, Squad Leader. With the last video, I did a playthrough of Forced March, which was the first tactical training scenario that was put out back in the day by Squad Leader Academy. And now with this video, I thought I'd do a playthrough of Hasty Assault, the second of those tactical training scenarios. As you guys will recall, Forced March was a straight-up, unadulterated infantry fight with only squads and leaders. But Hasty Assault will add machine guns to the mix, as well as smoke and concealment and hills and demo charges. The German 10-2 leader will even make an appearance when he sweeps majestically on board when he enters on turn 2. Well, anyway, like I did with the last video, I'll also treat this playthrough as a bit of a tutorial and talk about the new rules we're using for this scenario, like for smoke and concealment and whatnot, as they come up as I do the playthrough. Let's take a look at the scenario card. It's Russia, October 1942, and we read, "The concept of battlefield maneuver is easy to grasp conceptually, but hard to effectively orchestrate. The addition of assault tactics and the frequent requirement for an attacker to displace a defender from their positions will always significantly complicate a tactical problem. Successful attacking skills are only developed through experimentation and practice, but within the squad leader system, this too can be a very enjoyable process." Okie dokie. Then we see we're using good old board 3, but only rows GG through Q, inclusive, will be playable. So that will be the left half of the board when we get it set up. Let's check out the victory conditions. The Germans win by being the last to have sole control of each of the 3 stone buildings. The scenario is a draw if the Germans achieve their victory conditions, but lose, removed from the board, 4 or more squads. The Russians win by preventing the German victory condition. All right, and we'll take a look at the 3 stone buildings in question in a moment. But so the Germans will have to capture those, but if they want to win the scenario, they can't lose more than 3 squads in the process. Russian sets up first. Germans move first. There are 5 turns. And then last time we just played the base version of Forced March, but here for Hasty Assault, we're going all in. We'll throw in the whole shebang, the entire orders of battle shown here, and all the rules that the scenario card says are in play. Here we are on board 3 and its village, which has been much fought over in the world of Squad Leader. If you're wondering why there's a canal running through the middle of the board, I just did that to show that only rows GG through Q are playable, which, as I said a moment ago, is the left or west side of the board here. And I've laid out both sides' forces. Everything will start on board, except the 10-2 and these guys down here in the corner. They'll enter as reinforcements from the west on turn 2. Now, the victory conditions mentioned the Germans win by being the last to have sole control of the 3 stone buildings. And we see the 3 stone buildings in the playable area. So those will be building R3, building R5, and building T4. In any case, the Russians set up first, and their at-start forces are the 2 leaders, 9 447 squads, 2 628s, 4 LMGs, and 18 concealment counters. The 628s and 2 LMGs and 1 concealment counter must set up here in Hex Q5. But as far as everyone else, they have to set up in woods or building hexes east of hex row U inclusive and between hexes 3 and 8. So let's zoom in again. So the Russians can set up on hex row U and anywhere to the right in a building or woods hex that's numbered 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, or 8. While we're at it, there's a scenario special rule regarding the 628s. And the scenario special rule reads, both Russian 628 squads in Q5 may not move, although fire is permitted, until released, broken by German fire, or berserk. So how are they released? Well, the rule says the Russian player rolls 1 die at the end of the rally phase of each Russian turn. If the result is less than the number of Russian infantry units currently broken or eliminated, the forces are released by the battalion commander. So these squads being released depends on that die roll, and the die roll depends on the number of Russian infantry units currently broken or eliminated. All right then, as for the Germans, their at-start forces on board include 4 leaders, although one is the infamous 6+1, who is only marginally useful, 11 467 squads, 1 838, 5 LMGs and 2 MMGs, and there are 2 demo charges and 2 smoke counters. And the German at-start forces may set up on any whole or half hexes west of row X inclusive. So from row X to the left. Then the off-board reinforcements that will enter on turn 2 are that 10-2 leader, 2 467s, 1 838, and 2 LMGs. By the by, the German 838s are assault engineers, and they are the only squads that can place demo charges and place smoke counters. All right, those are the Russians and Germans that are going to be mixing it up in this scenario. Let's take a closer look at the board in relation to the victory conditions and each side's setup. It's going to be all about these 3 stone buildings. And to win, the Germans have to be the last to have sole control of each of those buildings. And sole control is defined as no enemy squad or leader can be in the building at game end, and your forces must have been the last to have occupied any hex of the building with an unbroken squad. So, basically for the Germans to win, there can't be any Russian squads or leaders in any of the 3 stone buildings at the end of turn 5. And if a building is empty, then the Germans have to have been the last ones in that building. Also, even if the Germans accomplish that, but if they've lost 4 or more squads, then the best they can get out of this scenario is a draw. Now, looking at the board, for the Germans as the attacker, there's 3 ways to approach the stone buildings. Let's call them the northern approach, up here, the southern approach, down here, and what we'll call the middle approach. I suppose you might also charge right over the top of Hill 522, but that'd be more than a little suicidal, and the Wehrmacht wasn't really known for bonsai attacks. In any case, no matter which approach is used, the Germans will eventually have to cross the open ground in the form of this road that circles around the center cluster of buildings. However, the Germans have all the tools they need to get at the stone buildings. Tools in the form of superb leaders, abundant MGs, and engineer squads with demo charges and smoke. The only thing the Germans might not have enough of is time. As far as the Russian defenders, their greatest strength is undoubtedly concealment. The Germans, as they advance, are going to face a veritable sea of concealment counters. I also think the 2.628s have the potential to be the Russians' ace in the hole. I say potential ace in the hole because by the time they come into play, I have a feeling the situation will already be getting rather desperate for the Russians. I'm not going to really talk about the Russian setup in detail because for this playthrough, I'm not going to show you, the viewer, where the Russian units are deployed. All you'll see here is what the German player would see as they survey the board after the Russian player finishes setting up. Needless to say, concealment is difficult to pull off when you're playing solitaire, since when you're playing both sides of a scenario, you're, well, for lack of a better word, omniscient. You can try to pretend you aren't all-knowing and all-seeing, but that's tough to pull off. One of the great advantages to setting up concealed in a two-player game is the uncertainty it causes for your opponent and the care with which they, of necessity, must act in the face of that uncertainty. Obviously, you lose that when you're playing solitaire, but for the purposes of this playthrough, I'll try to convey a bit of it by not letting you guys see where the Russian units are set up. Instead, all you see here are the concealment counters. So, having said all of that, here's what the German player would see as they check out the board after the Russian player is done setting up. Apart from what the German player knows is in Q5, the rest is a mystery. And now here's the board after the Germans are finished setting up. Here to the south, there's the 9-1 leader and 3 squads with 2 LMGs. There'll be one maneuver element on this part of the board moving up to OT1. The 8-1 leader and 3 squads with 2 MMGs are positioned to lay fire down the road and hopefully peel the concealment off T3 and or T4, because here is the 9-2 and 8-3-8 with 2 demo charges and 2 4.6.7s with 2 LMGs. And there'll be another maneuver element on this part of the board. They'll move up to V3 and be the ones to gain a lodgment across the road and crack the Russian defensive perimeter. Then up to the north are 3 squads with an LMG and the 6-1 leader. Obviously, the 6+1 is a bit of an odd bird. Included with the scenario, if you find it and download it, should be a short article about how to best employ a leader with these subpar leadership modifiers, how to employ him so he's not a liability or danger to the other German units. The upshot is that you don't have to use his +1 to direct attacks. You do have to apply his +1 if he's attempting to rally broken units. and you don't have to use his +1 when squads in his hex are engaged in close combat. Now, squads stacked with him do get that +2 movement factor bonus, so that's probably the best use for him. Also, he can be used to strip concealment if you consider him expendable, and get him adjacent to a concealed Russian unit in the movement or advance phase, and he'll force the removal of the concealment counter either by his being adjacent or by the concealed unit firing on him. Anyway, having the 6+1 as part of his order of battle forces the German player to have to think about how to use him. Alright, so now having looked at the Russian setup and the German setup, I think we're ready to get started. Alright, Germans go first. And as always, when you're using Vassal, you can pull up the sequence of play, like so. There's nothing to do in this first rally phase, so next is the prep fire phase. And the Germans are going to prep fire the 8-1 stack here, and they'll fire up at the Russians in hex T4, which is actually one of the victory building hexes. Now, we haven't talked about machine guns before, so let's take a minute to do that. Here with an MG, in this case an MMG, medium machine gun, you can see there are the two numbers, 4-12, 4 and 12. The 4 is the MMG's firepower and also its penetration factor, while the 12 is its range in hexes. We'll talk about penetration when it comes up, but just set it aside for now. Then on the counter you see the B12. The 12 is the MMG's breakdown number. If you roll a 12 when firing the MMG, it malfunctions and is broken until repaired. In Squad Leader, there are HMGs, MMGs, and LMGs, heavy, medium, and light machine guns. A squad may fire any one MG or two LMGs at no cost to its own firepower. There are some other rules regarding machine guns and their use, but I'll cover those when/if they come up during play. Alright, back to prep fire. The range here is 5 hexes, so within the 4-6-7's normal range, so we can add in their 12 firepower, and the 2 MMG's 8 firepower gives us 20. However, when the target is concealed, we have to use area fire, which means the attacker's firepower is halved. In this case, half of 20 is 10, so it'll get bumped down to the 8 firepower column here on the infantry firepower table. The Germans will get the leader's -1, while the Russians get the +3 for the stone building. So after all of that, the Germans are going to end up making an 8+2 attack. And that's just shorthand, meaning they'll use the 8 firepower column on the IFT, and their dice roll will be modified by +2. So 8+2. On the 8 column, we see the Germans will have to roll a modified 8 or less to hit. Now keep in mind, significantly, anything other than a miss will strip the concealment from T4, and that's the very least the German player is hoping to accomplish here. Okay, and the roll is 7, +2 equals 9, so the attack just misses. We'll go ahead and mark that stack with a prep fire counter. And next is the Germans' movement phase. And once again, like last time, I'll let you know that I'll be using the optional rule at the back of the rule book regarding semi-simultaneous movement and defensive fire. At any rate, To start things off, the 9-1 leader with 3 squads and 2 LMGs are going to move. Now, something else we haven't covered before is that when moving while lugging support weapons, you need to keep in mind something called portage costs. There's a handy chart on the player aid card, or the quick reference data card, as it's called in Squad Leader. Anyway, there's a handy chart that shows the portage costs for all the support weapons in the game. Basically, squads and leaders may carry support weapons at no or at varying costs to their own movement factors. For our purposes here, what we need to know is a squad may carry up to 3 portage points at no cost to their own movement factors. And LMGs are only 1 portage point, so there's no portage penalty here in this instance. So let's move these gentlemen. I'll move 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 into the building in U1. Then the 9-2 leader and his entourage are going to move forward, and they'll end up in the building in V3. They'll move by way of hex W4, which will give us a chance to talk about hills, specifically moving to a hex that is a higher elevation. Very simply, when moving onto a higher terrain hex than you previously occupied, squads and leaders must pay double the movement factor cost. For example, if these guys were instead moving up to hex X4, it would cost them 2 movement factors since they're moving up into clear terrain. That open ground would normally cost 1 movement factor, but it's a higher elevation, so it would be doubled to 2 movement factors. Since we said they're going to move by way of hex W4, and it's a woods hex, that's going to cost them 4 movement factors. Well, normally it costs 2 to move into a woods hex, but here it's a higher elevation, so it's doubled to 4 movement factors. All right, so 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, 6. And it doesn't cost anything extra to move to a lower elevation, so it's just the 2 movement factors for the wooden building. And as they moved through W4, there's actually no possibility for defensive fire, since the Russian line of sight from T4 is just blocked by this other hill hex in V4, and the line of sight from T3 is blocked by the building in V3. All right, next, the squads up here in X8 will move to W8, which we now know will cost them 4 movement factors, moving into woods at a higher elevation. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And the 6+1 leader will trail them into X8. He'll pay 2 movement factors to move into that woods hex. That is it for movement. There was no defensive fire from the Russians, and there is no defensive fire now, so it's the advancing fire phase. The stack in V3 will fire across the road at T4. The 3 squads and 2 LMGs total 20 firepower, halved for advancing fire to 10, halved again for area fire to 5. So the attack will end up being made on the 4 firepower column of the IFT. The Germans will get the -2 from the leader, while the Russians will get the +3 for the stone building. So the attack will be 4+1. 4 firepower plus 1 to the dice roll. And they roll 8 plus 1 equals 9 is a miss. We can mark them with an advancing fire counter. Now the squads and LMG in W8 will fire over here at the Woods Hex in U7. Now, if you care to, when you're making attacks like this one, and in fact with the other attack that I just made, you could count up the firepower factors and realize the LMG isn't really contributing anything to the attack, and you could leave it out of the attack. In other words, with the way the IFT is set up, you may have extra firepower that isn't going to help bump your attack up a column on the IFT. So in this case, you could just not use the MG, because by leaving the MG out of the attack, you might also potentially avoid some bad luck if you happen to roll a 12, which would break the MG. Well, at any rate, I'm not going to mess around with that. I'm just using all the firepower in the hex. If there's extra, there's extra. If I happen to roll a 12 and break an MG or 2, then I'll cross that bridge when I come to it. Anyway, here the 3 squads in LMG will be 14 firepower, halved for advancing fire to 7, halved again for area fire to 3.5. So the attack will end up being on the 2 column on the IFT. The Russians will get the +1 for the woods, so the attack will be a 2 + 1. And the Germans roll, hey, not boxcars, but snake eyes. So 2 + 1 equals 3, which is a 1 morale check. Anything other than a miss strips the concealment from the target hex, which reveals another concealment counter. We'll place those up here off board so the German player can keep count of how many have been revealed. And we can place an advancing fire counter on those Germans. Well, that's actually it for advancing fire. So now it's the rout phase. No one to rout, so it's the advance phase. Let's get rid of the prep fire counter and the advancing fire counters. Okay, the 9-1 stack is going to move up into the building in T1. And the Germans will take a chance. They will move a squad into V7. Concealment counters are removed at the end of the advance phase when an enemy squad or leader unit has moved adjacent to the concealment. So the Germans, who were kind of betting this would be another dummy stack, instead discover there's a 4-4-7 in U8. We'll move the concealment counter up here. And with that, that's it for the advance phase. There's no close combat. So that's the end of the Germans' first turn. And it's the Russian turn 1. There's nothing for the rally phase, so prep fire. And the squad in U8 is going to fire on the Germans who so casually sauntered up next to them. The firepower of the unit is doubled whenever the target hex is adjacent. That's called point blank fire. That means the Russian squad's 4 firepower is doubled to 8. There are no modifiers, so the attack will be 8 even. And the roll is 6, so a 1 morale check. Now the German squad, with its morale of 7, will roll. And it rolls 9 plus 1 is 10, so they fail the morale check and break. And we can place a prep fire counter on the Russians. Oh, that's actually it for prep fire. Next is the Russian movement phase. No one is going to move, so defensive fire phase. And as you might guess, there will be a bunch of defensive fire from the Germans. The 9-2 stack in V3 will fire again on T4. We know that's 20 firepower, halved for area fire to 10, so it'll end up on the 8 column. It's -2 for the leader, +3 for the stone building, so it ends up in 8 plus 1. The roll is 11, plus 1 equals 12, is a miss. We can mark them with defensive fire. Next, the stack, 8-1 stack, will also fire on T4. Again, 20 firepower, halved for area fire, so we find ourselves back on the 8 column. -1 for the leader, +3 for the stone building, so it'll be an 8 plus 2. The roll is 7, plus 2 equals 9, is a miss. Next, the 9-1 stack will fire across the road on T3. It'll be 16 firepower, halved for area fire to 8. Kind of stuck here on the 8 column. In any case, that's -1 for the leader, +2 for the stone wall, +2 for the wooden building, so it'll end up being an 8 plus 3. The roll is 9 plus 3 is 12, so that's a miss. And last, the Germans in W8 will fire on U8. That'll end up being an 8 plus 1, 8 firepower, +1 for the woods. The roll is 7 plus 1 equals 8, which is a morale check. So now the Russian squad rolls a 4, so it's okay. The Germans really struck out with all that defensive fire. Anyway, next is the advancing fire phase. There won't be anything. For the rout phase, the broken 467 has to skedaddle, since they're not only out in open ground, but they're also adjacent to the Russians. So they will move back to the woods in W8. That takes us to the advance phase, and all the Russians will stay where they are. No close combat, so that's the end of the first Russian turn. Okie dokie, German turn 2. The rally phase, there's nothing to do since the broken German squad isn't in the same hex as a leader, but we can remove that desperation morale counter. Next, the prep fire phase. Okay, to kick things off, smoke may be placed in any hex in or adjacent to an engineer squad as the first action during the prep fire phase. So the Germans will go ahead and do that. We'll grab one of their smoke counters and place it in U3. Of course, it's the 838 here that does that, and the engineer squad placing smoke can still move and or fire normally. As for the smoke itself, once placed, it's going to remain there until the beginning of the next German prep fire phase, at which time we will remove it. So let's ask the question, why place smoke? I mean, what's the benefit? Well, the rule book says, quote, "Smoke counters serve to reduce visibility in the hex in which they're placed." Okay, that being true, they're very helpful in a situation such as this when the Germans need to get across some open ground. Because anyone firing into, out of, or through a smoke-filled hex suffers a plus to the dice roll. And that modifier is a bit of a mystery until you make the die roll, because you make the die roll and it could be from +1 to +6. Keep in mind, smoke doesn't cancel the -2 from moving in open ground, but it does reduce visibility, which in game terms works out to whatever that die roll might be. So for example here, if the Germans move into U3, there'd still be the -2 for moving in open ground, but if the Russians fire on them, the Russians will have to roll a die, and the Germans might possibly benefit from a +6 that the Russians would have to then add to their attack dice roll. Okay, so placing smoke is the very first thing done in the prep fire phase, and we've taken care of that. Next, the Germans will prep fire up here using one squad and the LMG, and they'll shoot at the 447 here in the U8 Woods hex. So the squad and LMG, that'll be 6 firepower, then +1 for the Woods, so 6 + 1. And the German roll is 4, +1 is 5, so a 1 morale check. The 447 rolls that 1 morale check. 3 + 1 = 4, so it passes. And we can place a prep fire counter on that squad and LMG. Let's see here. So one squad didn't fire. Move him up to the top. Okay. Now, the German player was hoping to break the 447 with that prep fire and then move this other squad this turn, but the 447 didn't cooperate, didn't break, so that throws a wrench in the German plans. Now, the German player might like to say, well, okay, now I'll fire the other 467 at U8. But he actually can't do that, because if units in the same hex are going to fire on the same target hex, they have to make one combined attack. So since the one squad and LMG missed, the Germans have essentially forfeited being able to use this other squad in prep fire, at least against that Russian in U8. And since there's no one else for that other 467 to shoot at, it basically has to sit on its hands now during this prep fire phase. All right, in any case, moving right along, the 9-1 stack down here is going to prep fire against T3. So that'll be 16 firepower, halved for area fire to 8. Then there'll be -1 for the leader, +2 for the stone wall, +2 for the wooden building, so it will end up being an 8 + 3. And the Germans roll 3. +3 is 6, so a 1 morale check. And with that result, the concealment is removed. Put it up here. And revealed is a 447 and LMG. And now the Russian squad will take that 1 morale check. Rolls a 9, +1 is a 10, so it breaks. And we can place a prep fire counter on the 9-1 stack. That's actually it for prep fire for the Germans. So the movement phase. First of all, the German reinforcements arrive this turn. So let's get them together. Put them all in a stack here. Okay, they're going to enter the board from the west edge here, and they're just going to move along the road. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and they'll stop in Y4. Then the 8-1 stack is going to move. They're going to move through W2. This is a bit of a calculated risk since the Russians in T4 could fire through the smoke at them. We'll see. So 1, the Russians actually decline. They're going to hold their fire. So the Germans are going to go down here. 2, 3, 4, 5. And by the by, they only have 5 movement factors because of the portage costs of the MMGs. Also, something else to keep in mind is that the MMGs can't be moved and then fired in the advancing fire phase, because any squads carrying 4 or more portage points can't fire a support weapon in the ensuing advancing fire phase. So there you go. Basically what that means in this scenario is that if the Germans move their MMGs, they aren't going to be able to fire them that turn. Okie dokie. Then the 9-1 stack will lumber out into the road in U3. And they pay 2 movement factors since it costs an extra movement factor to move into a smoke hex. That's it for movement. Now the defensive fire phase. The Russian squad here in U8 is going to fire on their German buddies over here. So that'll be 4 firepower, +1 for the woods, so 4 + 1. And the Russian roll is snake eyes. 2 + 1 = 3, which is a 2 morale check. The German squads will roll that, top to bottom. 4 + 2 is 6, so passes. Now the broken squad. 5 + 2 is 7, passes. Now the squad with the LMG. 6 + 2 is 8. He breaks. Break him. Okay, and we can place a defensive fire counter on the Russian squad. And down here, the Russians in T4 are going to drop concealment and fire at the 9-2 stack. I mean, they might as well, right? Because the 9-2 stack, if it survives defensive fire, is going to advance into T3, which will strip the concealment from T4 and also S3 here. So the Russians in T4 and S3 have nothing to lose by dropping concealment now and firing. Well, the 9-2 stack is certainly going to advancing fire on one of them, but the Russians will accept that risk for the chance to do some damage while the Germans are in the street. So let's place these up here. And the German player can see he's revealed 6 concealment counters so far. So there's the 447 and LMG in T4. That'll be 6 firepower factors. It'll be +2 for the stone wall, but -2 for the Germans moving in the open. So that +2 and -2 cancel each other out. The Russian roll is 5. Okay, but now they have to roll that die for the smoke. And that roll is 3. 5 plus 3 is 8. And that just misses on the 6 column. Place a defensive fire counter there. Now S3 is going to drop concealment. And there's 2 447s there. So that's 8 firepower. Again, +2 for the stone wall there. -2 again for the Germans moving in the open. +2 and -2 cancel each other out. And they roll 8. So no matter what the smoke die roll would be, even a 1, they're going to miss here on the 8 column. And we'll place a defensive fire counter on them. That's it for defensive fire. So now the advancing fire phase. Up here, the 467 that just survived can actually now fire, since that's the one that missed out on prep fire. It can now fire at full firepower. So it'll fire over here at U8. That'll be 4 +1 for the woods, 4 +1. And it is a 4. +1 is 5. So 1 morale check. The Russian squad rolls. 5 +1 equals 6. Passes. Okay, we can mark them with advancing fire. The 9-2 stack is going to fire. It'll fire over here at S3. So 20 firepower, halved for advancing fire to 10. So that'll be on the 8 firepower column. -2 for the leader, +2 for the stone wall, +3 for the stone building. So it ends up being 8 +3. 9. So they'd have to roll for the smoke die firing out of that hex, and no matter what the roll with that 9, they've already missed on the 8 column. Mark them with advancing fire. That's actually it for advancing fire. So now the rout phase. And the 2 broken squads up here are going to route back into X8. They'll take their DM counter with them. And I don't think I've mentioned it before, but broken units have the same movement factors they normally have if they weren't broken. So squads have 4 and leaders 6. So these guys just spent 2 movement factors to move back into the woods with the 6+1. All right, then the broken Russian in S3 will route back to S3. And it has to route because it's adjacent to the Germans now. Broken units can't take any support weapons with them, so he has to leave the LMG behind. That brings us to the advance phase. Let's get rid of the fire markers just to tidy things up. Okay. The 10-2 stack will move up into X3. The 9-1 stack will move to S1. The 8-1 will come up and take their place. And the 9-2 stack will move into T3. There's no close combat. And with that, we come to the end of the second German turn. That was an eventful turn. The Germans, in the form of the 9-2 stack, have crossed the road and cracked the Russian defensive perimeter. So we'll see what happens next. In the rally phase, the Russian in S3 can't try to rally since he's not in a hex with an unbroken leader. The 2 broken German squads up here can try to rally, but they're up against it since they not only have the +4 for desperation morale, they also have to apply the +1 from the German leader. So they'd have to roll snake eyes to rally, but there's always a chance. So 7, no. 6, no. We'll remove the DM counters. Now remember, there's that scenario special rule, and it regards the 628s in Q5. And that special rule says they may be released when the Russian player rolls 1 die at the end of the rally phase of each Russian turn. If the result is less than the number of Russian infantry units currently broken or eliminated, the forces are released by the battalion commander. But since there's only the 1 broken Russian squad, there's no use rolling this turn. I mean, the roll isn't going to be less than 1. All right, prep fire phase. And the Russians have some decisions to make. Aware there's a potential 36 firepower fire group down here with these Germans, and there is 20 firepower here in T3. The Russians in S3 and T4 could try to bug out. Now, the squad in LMG here could get away, but the squads in S3 would probably get obliterated anyway, moving back. So, the Russians could prep fire S3 before they get shot up, then in the movement phase could actually jump back from T4 with the 447 and LMG into the road to avoid getting blasted. Then during the advance phase, scoot back up into T4. That's called skulking. Well, okay, all things considered, the Russians will prep fire from S3 versus the 9-2 stack, hoping for the best since they're probably sacrificing themselves. But yeah, the Russians will prep fire S3 and see what happens, then decide what to do with the squad and LMG in T4. So in S3, the two squads, that's 8 firepower, doubled for point-blank fire to 16. The Germans will get the +2 for the wooden building, so it's 16 + 2. The roll is 5 + 2 is 7. 2 morale check. It's not a bad result for the Russians. Okay, the German leader will roll first. 9 + 2 is 11. He breaks. And ladies and gentlemen, things just got interesting. Now the squads will roll their +2 morale checks, top to bottom. The 838, 4 + 2 is 6, passes. The 467, 4 + 2 is 6, passes. The other 467, 3 + 2 is 5, passes. All right, they all passed that 2 morale check, but now the squads have to take another morale check since the leader broke. 10, so the engineer squad breaks. 9, that 467 breaks. Again 3, so the other 467 passes. So let's break the 838 and 1 467. Let's look and make sure that's right. Yep. And we can place a prep fire counter on the Russians. Now the Russians have to decide what to do with the 447 and LMG. They'd get a 12 + 2 attack on the Germans in T3, who are obviously in trouble. And they'd have a chance to also break that other 467 or eliminate someone. And the Russians just can't pass up that opportunity. So they open fire. Point blank fire, we just said that's doubled to 12. +2 for the wooden building. 12 + 2. The roll is 4 + 2 is 6. So another 2 morale check. Leader. 7 + 2 is 9, passes. The 838. 6 + 2 passes. 467. 9 + 2 is 11, so it breaks the second time and will be eliminated. And the other 467. 4 + 2 is 6, it passes. So that 467 hangs tough. But we'll send this squad to the graveyard. And we can mark them with prep fire. Anyway, that's it for prep fire. So now the Russian movement phase. The 447 up here in U8 is going to decide he's done enough from this spot, pretty much wrecking the Germans' northern thrust all by itself. So it's going to spend all 4 of its movement factors, move down to the woods in T7, then to the building in T6, aiming to end up in U6 after the advance phase. So 1, 2, 3, 4. That's all for movement, so now defensive fire. And as expected, the Germans will form a fire group with the 9-1 and 8-1 stacks versus S3. As I said, that'll be 36 firepower. And you can only use 1 leader's modifier in a fire group. So either way, with the 9-1 or 8-1, it's obviously a -1. Then +3 for the stone building. So it ends up being a 36 + 2. The Germans roll 3 + 2 is 5, which is a KIA. So the 3 Russian squads are annihilated by a storm of bullets. We'll put them up here. And we can place a defensive fire counter on that fire group. Now the 467 left standing in T3 will fire with 2 LMGs. And they'll fire on T4. That's doubled for point blank fire. So 8 doubled will be 16. +3 for the stone building. So 16 + 3. 11 + 3 is 14, so a miss. We'll place a defensive fire counter on them, but that's actually it for defensive fire. So now advancing fire, and there's nothing. That brings us to the rout phase. Okay, so what happens here is that the Germans in T3 have to rout because they're adjacent to the Russian squad in T4. They have to take the shortest route to suitable cover in the form of a woods or building hex. So the nearest building hex is right here adjacent to them in S3. But you may ask, what about the concealed Russian units here in R3? Well, very simply, the Germans have to rout as if they don't know that concealed stack is there in R3. Yep. So they will route to S3, the squad and the leader. Take their DM counter. The broken engineer squad has to leave behind the demo charges. Okay. Now the advance phase. The squad here will reach its destination in U6. Then the Russians in R3 are going to drop concealment. And we see there is a 447 and the 80 leader. The leader will scoot back here into Q4. The squad will advance into S3. And during the close combat phase, the broken Germans there are eliminated. Any broken units that find themselves in a close combat hex are eliminated. So we'll send them to the graveyard. That's it for the advanced phase and close combat. So that's the end of Russian turn 2. Well, all right then. What a difference a turn makes. At the end of the Germans' second turn, they'd managed to successfully get across the road in force and crack the Russian defensive perimeter. But now, here at the end of the Russians' second turn, the Germans are left hanging on in T3 by their fingernails. But they have lost the 9-2 leader, an 8-3-8 engineer squad, and also a 4-6-7. Remember, to get a win in this scenario, the Germans can only lose 3 squads, because even if they have sole control of the 3 stone buildings, but lose 4 or more squads, the game will end up as a draw. Okay, anyway, I can't wait to see what happens next. Okay, it's the beginning of the Germans' third turn. First up, the rally phase. The 2 broken squads up here can try to rally, although they still have the +1 for the 6+1 leader hanging around their necks. But 5+1 is 6. One of them rallies. 3+1 is 4. The other one does as well. That is it for the rally phase. So now prep fire phase. First thing we'll do is remove the old smoke counter. Next, the German squad in T3 will fire on the Russian squad next door in T4. The 4-6-7 plus 2 LMGs will be 8 firepower, doubled for point blank fire to 16, plus 3 for the stone building. So the attack will be 16 plus 3. And the Germans roll 7 plus 3 is 10. So that just hits, and it's a morale check. The Russian squad rolls 9 and breaks. We'll put a prep fire counter on that German squad. Next, the 8-1 stack will fire across the street at the Russian squad in S3. That'll be 20 firepower, -1 for the leader, plus 3 for the stone building. So it'll end up being a 20 plus 2. A 6 plus 2 is 8, so a 2 morale check. The Russian squad rolls an 11, which even without the +2 breaks it big time. And we can place a prep fire counter on the 8-1 stack. That is it for prep fire. So now it's the Germans' movement phase. The squad and LMG are going to move from W8 over to the woods in U7. 1, 2, 3. And the 6+1 and 2 squads will move up into W8, then to V7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The 9-1 stack will move up here. Then you can write it on their gravestones if this doesn't work, but desperate times call for desperate measures. So the 10-2, 838, and 1467 with 2 LMGs is going to run from W3 to V2 to U3, jump the stone wall into the building in T3. And that'll take 5.5 movement factors. It'll be 1, 2, 2.5, 1 to jump the stone wall, so 3.5, 2 to enter the building, so that'll be 5.5. Let's just move 1467 aside for now, since he won't be going. 1, 2, 2.5. But the Russian squad in U6 has them hit the pause button as they enter U3, because this is precisely why the Russian squad came down into U6. The Russian player knew that 10-2 would need to get across the road. And so here we are, with perhaps the game hanging in the balance if the Russian squad rolls spectacularly. So that'll be 4 firepower, -2 for the Germans moving in the open. So 4 -2. And the Russian roll is 10 -2 is an 8, so a swing and a miss. We can place a defensive fire counter on them. And I imagine you can hear the squad in U6 turn the air blue with some choice Russian swear words as the Germans race across the road safely and end up in T3. Anyway, we can place a tracking counter on U3 just in case the 467 feels lucky and wants to try the same mad dash up into U3. They would get hit with that same 4 -2 attack. And we're getting quite a stack in T3, so it might be a good time to mention that as far as stacking limits, you can have 10 portage points of support weapons in a hex, and there are currently 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 portage points there between the various LMGs and demo charges, so it's all good. Anyway, the other 467 here isn't going to push the Germans' luck, so it'll just move up to the building in V3. 1, 2, 3. That's it for movement. So now defensive fire. And there isn't any, so advancing fire. The squad in LMG here will fire down on U6. So that'll be 6 firepower, halved for advancing fire, but doubled for point blank fire. So it'll stay 6. +2 for the wooden building. So 6 +2. The German roll is 4 +2 is 6, which is a 1 morale check. The Russian squad rolls 10, which even without the +1 breaks it. And we can place an advancing fire counter on the Germans. Next, from T3, the 838 and 467 with 2 LMGs. They're going to fire up here on S5. So that'll be 16 firepower, halved for advancing fire to 8, halved again for area fire to 4. Then the -2 for the leader, +2 for the building, cancel each other out. So it'll be 4 even. The German roll is 6, which is a morale check, which is enough to strip the concealment from S5, which reveals 3 concealment counters. And we can place an advancing fire counter on those guys. Next, the squad in V3 will go ahead and fire over here at T4. So that's 4 firepower, halved for advancing fire to 2, +3 for the stone building. So they'll have to roll snake eyes to hit. 6, miss. Advancing fire. Finally, the 9-1 stack will fire on the broken squad in S3. That's 16 firepower, halved for advancing fire to 8, doubled for point blank fire, so it stays 16. -1 for the leader, +3 for the stone building, so that ends up 16 +2. The Germans roll 7 +2 is 9, so a 1 morale check. The Russians roll. Oh, and here we go. Snake eyes. And you know what that means.
Attention all Kmart shoppers, we have a Berserk Russian squad in S3. I repeat, we have a Berserk Russian squad in S3.
All right, that's just a bit of fun. Everyone seems to get excited when there's a Berserk Russian unit on the board. Let's just take a look at the rules for Berserk units. Here starting with 18.4. If when making a morale check for a Russian infantry unit, even if already broken, a 2 is rolled, the unit becomes Berserk with the following heroic consequences. The Berserk unit is immune to all morale checks for the remainder of the scenario. That's big. It must be eliminated to be stopped. Replace it with a red counter of the same type so that it can be easily distinguished. A Berserk unit must charge the nearest enemy unit in its line of sight during its movement and advance phase in an attempt to destroy it in close combat. The charging unit must take the shortest route to the enemy unit. It may fire during the defensive fire and advancing fire phase, but not during the prep fire phase. Berserk squad has 6 movement factors. And then if a leader becomes Berserk. Okay, so that's pretty much what we need to know right now for that squad in S3 having rolled that 2 in its morale check. All right then, those are the Berserk rolls. That's it for advancing fire. So let's get rid of all the fire counters. Fire, defensive fire, advancing fire. Now it's the route phase. The broken Russian squad in U6 has to route since it's adjacent to the German squad. It would route back to S5. It wouldn't bring it any closer to a known enemy unit because the 10-2 stack of Germans is actually out of sight. However, although it starts off in U6 out of sight of the Germans in V3, when the broken Russians move into T5, they do come into sight of the Germans in V3, so they are eliminated. Put them up there. Then the broken squad in T4 also has to route, but it can do so safely and end up in S5, where it stops. Leaves behind the LMG. Okay, that's it for routing. So now it's the advance phase. These guys will move down into T6. These guys will move into U7. The 8-1 stack will move, well, okay. The 9-1 stack is going to move into S3 and say howdy to the Berserk Russians. The 8-1 stack will move into S2. The squad will move into U4. And the 10-2 stack, will move up into the victory building in T4. Okay, that's it for the advance phase. So now close combat. And this is the first time in either the last video or this video that we are going to have the two antagonists mixing it up in close combat. The close combat procedure is fairly simple, but basically it's a different kind of combat in which both sides are going to get a chance to take out the other, because both sides' close combat attacks are considered to be happening simultaneously. Let's just move the combatants down here. And that'll help us explain what's going on. So let's do the Germans. They'll use all three squads, and with their attack they can add in the two LMGs. LMGs are the only support weapons that can be used in close combat, but only by the attacker, not the defender. So that'll total up to 16 firepower, and in close combat it's compared to the Russian squad's 4 firepower. And that comes up, or that gives you an odds ratio of 4-to-1. In other words, 16 versus 4 comes out to 4-to-1. And on the close combat table, we see that as the attacker, the Germans have to roll 9 or less. 4-to-1, the Germans have to roll 9 or less with 2 dice to eliminate the Russian squad. The fact the Russian squad is Berserk is neither here nor there as far as close combat. There are no terrain modifications to a close combat dice roll, but the Germans, as the attacker, can use the -1 from the 9-1 leader. All right, having said all that, they roll 5 minus 1 is 4, so they will eliminate the Russian squad. But remember, close combat is simultaneous, so before it's removed from the board, the Russian squad gets a chance to hit the Germans. And close combat attacks can be divided any way the attacker wishes, just as long as no unit is attacked more than once. So the Russian could attack all 3 German squads, or even 2 of the German squads, but those odds wouldn't be great. So it's just going to engage in close combat with 1 of the German squads, and that'll even up the odds. If the Russian squad had an LMG, it would be able to use it since it's the attacker now, but it doesn't have an LMG. The Germans do have LMGs, but now as the defender, they can't count those in. So, this is going to even the odds as the two squads square off. 4 firepower to 4 firepower will be 1 to 1. And on the close combat table, we see that at 1 to 1, they roll a 5 or less to eliminate the German squad. But they roll 6, so close, but no cigar. The Russian squad is eliminated. And the Germans end up in sole possession of Hex S3 in the victory building. That's it for close combat. And so that's the end of German turn 3. Wow, a lot happened in that turn. At the beginning, things weren't looking so great for the Germans, but they seem to have turned things around now, especially with that successful dash across the road by the 10-2 and squads that got them into T3 and now up into the 1 victory building in T4. And another of the victory buildings here has the 9-1 stack there after close combat. So, we'll see what happens now with the Russian turn coming up. All right, Russian turn 3. In the rally phase, the broken squad in S5 can't try to rally because it's not in the same hex as a leader, although we can remove the DM counter. There we go. Also here in the rally phase of this new Russian turn, the scenario special rule kicks in again regarding the release of the 628s. Remember that rule says 1 die is rolled, and if the roll is less than the number of Russian infantry units broken or eliminated, then the 628s are released. So, there are 5 eliminated Russian squads, which we placed up here off board. And on board, there is the 1 broken Russian squad, so that totals 6, which means the Russian player can roll anything other than a 6. And the roll is a 6. Of course it is. Okie dokie. So the 628s still can't move, but they are able to fire like they have been able to all along, but yep, still can't move. All right, then prep fire phase, and there won't be anything. Movement phase. The 8-0 leader is going to move over the hedge into the woods in Q5, and then over into the building in R5. So that'll be 5 movement factors. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Well, we'll just kind of leave them there. All right, then the defensive fire phase. The 10-2 stack will fire on the broken squad next door in S5. Doubled for point blank fire. That'll put it on the 36 plus column of the IFT. It'll be -2 for the leader, +2 for the wooden building, so 36 even. And the Germans roll 7, and that's a KIA. Put him up here also. Oh. Can put defensive fire counter on them. The squad and LMG in T6 will fire on R5 And there will be 2 attacks here, but using the same dice roll. So one attack will use area fire because it's against the concealed units, while the other attack is against the 8-0 leader at the full 6 firepower. So against the 8-0 leader will be 6 plus 3 for the building, while the attack against the concealed units will be on the 2 firepower column with the same plus 3 for the building. The Germans roll 10. Plus 3 is 13, and a miss for both attacks. That's it for defensive fire. Next, the advancing fire phase, and there's nothing. Next, the rout phase. Again, nothing. Then the advance phase. And the 8-0 leader has remembered that morning he left his favorite coffee mug in building S5. So he dashes over there. There's no close combat, so that's the end of Russian turn 3. Here at the start of German turn 4, the German player can see that so far he's uncovered 12 concealment counters, which aside from the one in Q5 means there are still 5 concealment counters left in play. And there are 6 eliminated Russian squads, which means aside from the 628s, there are still 3 Russian 447s remaining in play, and the Russian 9-2 leader is somewhere also. And the German player knows he has just this turn and the next turn to clear the Russians out of the last victory building, and hold on to it, of course. So the clock is ticking. As for the Russian player, he's getting kind of backed into a corner, right? He still has the advantage of concealment. However, the 628s haven't been released to move yet, which isn't ideal. And as you can probably tell from that move with the 8-0 leader into S5, the Russian player is at the point where he thinks the best he can do is trade units for time, stalling the German advance as much as possible. And then, since he goes last in the game's last turn, turn 5, then he's hoping to be able to hit the Germans hard with the 628s, and when the dust settles, be hanging on to hex R6. But it's going to be difficult. The German player has these high firepower stacks, and it's just tough to stand toe-to-toe with kill stacks like that. Plus, the German still has the 2 demo charges. Having said that, the Germans have lost those 2 squads already, so they can only afford to lose just 1 more if they hope to claim an outright victory. Because if they lose 4 or more squads, then the best they can get out of the game is a draw. Okay, anyway, I thought it might be good just to take a minute to take stock of the situation facing both sides here as we head into the last 2 turns. And then maybe it would be beneficial also to hide the units for a second so we can just take a look at the board and see where there's going to be a lot of action these last 2 turns. It's all going to be focused on that last victory building and those 2 hexes in R5 and R6. Okay. All right, getting back to the game, it's the rally phase. And the Germans are going to take the opportunity here to destroy the 2 Russian LMGs in T4. Rule 17.8 says, any unbroken unit may destroy support weapons at no cost to its own fire or movement abilities during any phase of its own player turn, provided it ends the phase in the same hex with the weapon and is not engaged in close combat. Okay, so the German player is just going to get rid of them. Okay, next, the prep fire phase. And the squad and LMG in T6 will fire on the 8-0 Russian leader in S5. That will be 6 firepower, plus 2 for the wooden building, so 6 plus 2. The roll is 10 plus 2 is 12, and that's a miss. Now, the 10-2 leader, the 2 4.67s, and 4 LMGs will fire next door on the Russian 8-0 leader. So that will be 16 firepower, doubled for point blank fire to 32. So it'll end up on the 30 column of the IFT. Minus 2 for the leader, plus 2 for the building, so 30 even. And the roll is 5. That's a KIA. Move the 8-0 up here. Can place a prep fire counter on the guys that fired. Let's see here. The 838 did not fire. Make sure that's right. Yep. Okay. Now the movement phase. The 9-1 stack will move into R3. The 8-1 stack, because the 6.28s have a line of sight to R2, they're going to go into the woods at R1, then Q2, and end in Q3. 1, 2, 3, 4. The 2 4.67s are going to move down into the woods in T7. They'll leave the 6+1 behind. The 4.67 here will move through T4 to S5, spending all 4 of its movement factors. Then the 838 will move into S5. Just move them aside here for the moment. Take the demo charges. Okay, so the 838 moves into S5, and as he does so, he throws or places one of the demo charges there in R5. Okay. Next, defensive fire phase. The Russians in R5 will drop concealment, since they'll lose it anyway at the end of the defensive fire phase for being adjacent to the Germans now. Put that up here with the others. And the Russian 9-2 leader and a 4.47 are revealed. They'll fire on S5 with that 4 firepower, doubled for point blank fire to 8. Will be -2 for the leader, +2 for the building, so 8 even. And the roll is 9, so just misses. They've defensive fired. Then at the end of the defensive fire phase, the concealment will be stripped from S8, revealing 2 concealment counters. Also put those up here. Now the advancing fire phase. First up, the demo charge will go off in R5. It goes off with 30 firepower. The Russians do get the +3 for the stone building. Pull up the IFT, 30 column, 30 +3. Now the roll is 8 +3 is 11, which is a 1 morale check. We'll remove the demo charge from play. The Russians will take that 1 morale check. Leader first. 7 + 1 is 8. Passes. Squad will get a -1 because of the leader's modifier. 6 - 1 is 5, so it passes. Okay, still advancing fire, and the 838 and 467 are going to fire on R5. So that'll be 12 firepower, halved for advancing fire to 6, doubled for point blank fire, back to 12. +3 for the stone building, so 12 +3. 8 +3 is 11, and that's a miss. Mark them with advancing fire. The 2 squads up here in the woods in T7 are also going to fire on R5. So that'll be 8 firepower, halved for advancing fire to 4, +3 for the building. The roll is 12. Even without the +3, big miss. And last, the 9-1 stack and 8-1 stack will form a fire group versus Q5. The Germans can't use the MMGs because they just moved. So that'll end up being 28 firepower for both stacks. Halved for advancing fire to 14. Halved for area fire to 7. So it'll end up on the 6 column. +1 for the woods. +1 for the hedge. -1 for a leader, so that ends up being 6 + 1. The roll is 5 + 1, which is 6, and a 1 morale check. Get rid of that concealment counter. And now the 628s will roll that 1 morale check. 6 + 1 is 7, passes. 5 + 1 is 6, passes. Okie dokie. Now the rout phase, and there's nothing. The advance phase. The 838 and 467 are going to advance into R5. These fellows will advance into S5. These guys will move here. These guys will move here. These guys will move here. They'll move there. There we go. Okay, and at the end of the advanced phase, we can remove the concealment from R6, since they are now adjacent to multiple Germans. And of course, there's the last two 447s. Now we'll do the close combat in R5. Let's just move everyone off to the side here. Can mark that hex with close combat. Okay, let's do the Germans first. That's 12 firepower versus 4 firepower for the Russian squad. So 12 versus 4 is 3-1, and the Germans need to roll 8 or less to eliminate the Russians. The roll is 7, so the Russians will be eliminated. But first, the Russian squad will get to attack, and it will attack only the 467. Now, as the attacker, the Russians do get to use the -2 for the attack. So 4 to 4 is 1 to 1. They'll get the -2 for the leader. So they need to roll a modified 5 or less. The roll is 3. -2 is 1, so they eliminate the 467. Just move the Russians off to the side here. We'll send the 467 to the graveyard. And the 838 is the last squad standing in R5. Let's take a look at the graveyard. Because with that 467 being eliminated, the Germans have now lost 3 squads. So if they lose any more, there's no way they'll be able to outright win the scenario. Okay. Things are coming down to the wire. And that's the end of the Germans' 4th turn. All right, the 4th Russian turn. There's nothing in the rally phase. There won't be any prep fire. So the movement phase. Okay, the 628s are going to move. They move back into the woods in Q6, and as they do so, the Germans stop them because the Germans in R4 and R5 are going to form a fire group and fire on them there. Okay, so that's 16 firepower for R4, 8 firepower doubled for point blank fire for the engineer squad. So 16 plus 16 is 32. It ends up on the 30 column on the IFT. +1 for the woods, -1 for the leader, so 30 even. Yikes. And this could essentially be the game right here. The roll is an 8, which is a 3 morale check. Okay. The Russians roll that 3 morale check. 4. plus 3 is 7, passes. 9 plus 3 is 12, breaks. So 1 breaks. And can mark them with defensive fire. Okay, so the unbroken 628 is going to continue moving. We'll give him both LMGs. And he'll continue moving and end in the wooden building in Q7. So that was all 4 movement factors. 1, 2 for the woods, 3, 4 for the building. Now the 2 squads in R6 are also going to move into Q7. So next, the proper defensive fire phase. And the 2, 4, 6, 7s here are going to fire on the Russians in Q7. So that's 8 firepower for the 2 squads, plus 2 for the wooden building, so 8 plus 2. The roll is 5 plus 2 is 7, which is a 1 morale check. Now the Russians will roll that, top to bottom. 3 plus 1 is 4, passes. 5 plus 1 is 6, passes. 6 plus 1 is 7, passes. Okay. Now advancing fire. And everyone in Q7 will return the favor and fire at the Germans in S7. So that's the 628 and 2 LMGs and 2 447s. So 18 firepower, halved for advancing fire to 9. So it will end up on the 8 column of the IFT. 8 even. The roll is 6, which is a 1 morale check. Germans will roll that. 4 plus 1 is 5, passes. 10, which even without the plus 1 breaks. 1 squad. Okay. Now the rout phase. And the broken Russian squad in Q6 is eliminated. Why? Well, it could route back to Q7, but it couldn't stop there because there are already 3 Russian squads there. So it would have to continue its route through Q7. And when it goes into Q8, that puts it within the line of sight and normal range of the German squad here, and that will eliminate them. Okay, but the broken Russian squad, German squad, will go back to T6. Now the advance phase. 1 447 is going to go into R6. The other 447 is going to go into Q6. That's it. No close combat. So that's the end of Russian turn 4. Here we are. It's German turn 5. This is it, the last turn. Hang on to your hats, boys and girls. Okay, first, the rally phase. The broken German in T6 can try to rally, even though it's saddled with +4 desperation morale and the +1 for the leader. It rolls 6. Nope. +4, +1. Dooms its chances. Nope. But we can get rid of the desperation morale. Next, the prep fire phase. The 2 German squads in S6 and S7 will fire on R6. So that'll be 10 firepower, doubled for point blank fire to 20, +3 for the building. 9 + 3 is 12, which just misses. Okay, we'll mark them with prep fire. The 9-1 stack will fire on the 447 in the woods up in Q6. So that's 16 firepower, -1 for the leader, +1 for the woods, cancel each other out, so 16 even. The roll is 6, which is a 2 morale check. The Russian roll, the +2 morale check is 3 + 2 is 5, passes. We'll mark them with a prep fire. Next, the 838 will fire on R6. So that's 8 firepower, doubled for point blank fire to 16, +3 for the building. So 16 + 3. The roll is 10 + 3 is 13, which is a miss. That's it for prep fire. Next is movement. Now the 838 is going to place the demo charge in R6. And yes, even though it prep fired, it can still place the demo charge. Okay, we'll just leave it there. Next, the 10-2 stack is going to move up into R6. And the 8-1 stack will hop over the hedge into the woods in Q5. That's it for movement. So now defensive fire. All 3 Russian squads are going to fire on the 10-2 stack. We'll hide the units for a minute. You can see they all have a line of sight there to R5. So the 2 447s will be 8 firepower, doubled for point blank fire to 16, plus the 10 firepower from the 628 and 2 LMGs will be 26 firepower. So the 24 column, +3 for the building. So 24 + 3. The roll is 5 + 3, which is 8, which is a 2 morale check. All right, the Germans will roll that 2 morale check. Leader first. 7 + 2 is 9, passes. Now the squads get to use the leader's -2, which cancels out the +2. So these will be normal morale checks. Top to bottom, 11. breaks. 6 passes. Another 6 passes. So the 1, 4, 6, 7 broke. And we'll just put that over here for the Russian squads. That's actually it for defensive fire, obviously. So now the advancing fire phase. The demo charge is going to go off with 30 firepower, +3 for the building. Roll is 9 + 3 is 12, which is a 1 morale check. The Russian squad rolls 9, which even without the +1 breaks it. Next, the 10-2 stack and 8-1 stack will form a fire group and will fire on the Russian squad in Q6. So here, the 838 prep fired, so it's the 4.67 and 2 LMGs. That'll be 8 firepower, halved for advancing fire to 4, doubled for point blank fire back to 8. Then here it's just the 4.67 since the MMGs can't fire in the advancing fire phase. So that's 12 firepower, again, halved and doubled, stays at 12. So all of that adds up to 20 firepower. Be +1 for the woods, -2 for the leader. So 20 minus 1. The roll is 10 minus 1 is 9, which is a 1 morale check. The Russian roll is 7 + 1 is 8. It breaks. We won't bother to mark them with an advancing fire counter because that's it for advancing fire. Next, the rout phase. Both Russian squads will move back to Q7. The German squad will also route back to S5. Well, okay. In the advance phase, the 10-2 stack will move into R6. The squad in S6 will join them. The 8-1 stack will move up into Q6, and the 9-1 stack will move up into the victory building. All right, there's no close combat. So that's the end of German turn 5. All right, and it's Russian turn 5. This is the last turn of the game. In the rally phase, the 2 broken Russian squads can't try to rally, minus a leader, but the broken German squad in T6 can try again. It rolls 6, +1 for the leader is 7, So it rallies. Broken German squad here. Again, without a leader, can't try to rally. Can get rid of the desperation morale counters. Next is the prep fire phase. And the 628 and 2 LMGs will fire on R6. So that's 10 firepower, doubled for point blank fire to 20, plus 3 for the building. So 20 plus 3. The roll is 5 plus 3, which is an 8, and that's a 2 morale check. And here we go. The German leader rolls that 2 morale check. 9 plus 2 is 11, breaks. Now the German squads at plus 2. 8 plus 2 is 10, breaks. 5 plus 2 is 7, passes. Another 8 plus 2 is 10, breaks. So, break. Break. Now the squads roll their second morale check because the leader broke. Top to bottom. 9, which means it's eliminated. 10, breaks. And the engineer squad, 7, so it's okay. Okay, this squad broke. This squad failed its morale check, so it gets sent to the graveyard. All right, that was pretty much what the Russian player was hoping would happen. Let's go up to the graveyard. And we see with that squad being eliminated, that's the 4th German squad that's been sent to the graveyard. So the Germans aren't going to be able to get a win in the scenario. The best they can do now is come out of it with a draw. In any case, there's obviously no movement, so now the defensive fire phase. And the 8-1 stack will fire. That's 20 firepower, doubled for point blank fire. So it'll be on the 36 column on the IFT. -1 for the leader, plus 2 for the building, so 36 plus 1. And the roll is 5 plus 1 is 6, which is a KIA. And that's all she wrote. As the last good order Russian squad is blown away by a storm of bullets, that's the game. And so, although the Germans successfully ended up with sole control of the 3 stone buildings, they lost 4 squads in the process, so the game ends in a draw. Now, that scenario was a lot of fun to play, especially since it went right down to the wire with the last turn. I hope you enjoyed watching the video. Thanks for watching it. And as the curtain comes down on Hasty Assault, I hope you keep calm, roll low, and take care.